and welcome to the Columbus Metropolitan Club. Thank you all for joining us. I'm Doug Buchanan. I'm a member of CMC's Board of Trustees and the editor-in-chief of Columbus Business First. It is great to see all of you who could join us in person today. We really do appreciate it. Today's forum is sponsored by Huntington and GCAC and our partners, United Way of Central Ohio. Won't you help me please thank them as well for all of our sponsors. Now it's my pleasure to welcome Christina Brown, Central Ohio Director of Community Philanthropy and Engagement at Huntington, to introduce our forum. Christina, please.
Well, good afternoon. For more than a decade, Huntington's brand has been welcome. Welcome to all. It's tangible yet aspirational, but it's something that we can all strive to live up to. But welcome is more than just a word. It's a mindset. It's a desire to look out for people. While we endeavor to be a purpose-driven organization, one that makes people's lives better, helps businesses thrive, and helps to strengthen our communities, we can do more. We believe through listening and seeking to understand that we can drive action and collectively be a part of positive change. Huntington is proud to support the mission of the Columbus Metropolitan Club, as important topics are discussed each week in community conversation and where everyone is welcome to participate. While diversity is a conversation important to so many, the nonprofit sector in particular holds a special awareness on the topics that face our community and beyond. We've convened an expert panel for the conversation today. Please help me to welcome founder and executive director of Ethiopian Tawahedo Social Services, or ETSS, Seleshe Asfa. President and CEO of Catholic Social Services, Rachel Lustig. Executive Director of City Year Columbus, Tasha Booker. Our host today, journalist at NBC4, Carrie Charles. But first, Michael Wilkos, Senior VP, Community Impact of United Way of Central Ohio, will help to make opening remarks. Michael, let's get started.
Thank you, Christina. The events of 2020 have changed our lives in ways we did not imagine when the year began. Throughout it all, the Central Ohio nonprofit community has risen to the challenges by serving as the frontline defense for tens of thousands of residents. The National Council on Nonprofits says our sector feeds, heals, shelters, educates, and nurtures our bodies and spirits. They turn our beliefs into actions as promoters of democracy, champions of the common good, incubators of innovation, laboratories of leadership, protectors of taxpayers, responders in times of trouble, stimulators of the economy, and weavers of community fabric. It is for these reasons that 1 in 10 people in Franklin County are drawn to employment in the nonprofit sector. 75,000 of us work every day to bring these values to life. In addition to all of the challenges of 2020 has brought, the nonprofit sector is further challenged to achieve racial equity in its board, staff, and volunteer base. 20 years ago, 75% of Franklin County was white. Now just 62% is white. This significant racial change occurred during a time of rapid population growth, with 250,000 more residents. We are the most diverse county in Ohio, and no other county comes close to our population growth in real numbers. Just the foreign-born population of Franklin County is equal in size to the entire populations of the suburban counties of Morrow, Hocking, Perry, and Madison. However, considering the work that must be achieved in order to move towards greater racial justice, the present moment offers an opportunity to better understand what Central Ohio nonprofits are doing to foster racial equity within their organizations and what resources, supports, or tools may help advance these efforts. I am honored you will soon hear from 3 great nonprofit leaders I respect and admire for their work. The data released today by United Way of Central Ohio was possible because of our partnership with Illuminology, enabling us to survey 92 health and human nonprofit organizations. A special thank you to Illuminology, a social science research firm that applies time-tested and emerging methods from the academic fields of psychology and anthropology to real-world settings. They have helped hundreds of nonprofit, public, and private sector organizations make and measure impact. A huge thank you to Dr. Ori Christel, who leads this organization, and for his leadership for immediately reaching out to United Way and the Human Service Chamber to offer services to help us better understand the nonprofit sector. Thank you, Ori, for your service. This is the 5th in a series of surveys we have done since March. This survey was fielded in mid-September and includes United Way, the Human Service Chamber, City of Columbus, Franklin County, and the Community Shelter Board partner nonprofits. These nonprofits have a combined workforce of 15,000 staff and offer more than 1,000 programs. So what did we learn? About half of nonprofits report making significant progress or taking significant steps toward becoming a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive organization. For others, more work remains. In 2020, just 23% of our nonprofits have boards that have a racial or ethnic composition that is as diverse or more so than Franklin County's population. Staff competition, however, tends to be more racially and ethnically diverse, with 44% of nonprofits having staffs that have a racial or ethnic composition as diverse as the general population. However, this diversity is not equally distributed throughout staff positions. More than 80% of our local nonprofit boards consider diversity when they are recruiting new members, but also when new staff positions are being reviewed. However, not all of our local nonprofits are implementing all of the possible diversity, equity, and inclusion policies or participate in all types of training that might help them achieve the goal of greater racial or ethnic representation. The most two commonly requested resources were funding and training. This includes funds to pay for training programs and for outside consultants to help organizations assess racial equity, improve over time, and measure progress. They also requested funds to actually do work in their organizations to address racial equity and to sustain those efforts over time. Training to help organizations build diverse boards and help board members understand the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion is preferred. But it was implicit bias that was the most common specific need identified, along with help locating free or no-cost training resources. Some mentioned that trainings tailored to their specific organization, the populations they specifically serve, or that is specific to the Central Ohio market would be most useful. And additionally, access to training that is rooted in best practices and vetted is beneficial to the sector. But it's also assistance in recruiting more diverse boards and staff was the third most common area of support. This includes training to recruit Black, Indigenous, and people of color to serve on boards and find candidates, especially when job and volunteer openings require specific licensures. This requires a stronger pipeline in workforce development and support for professional development to increase the pool of available diverse individuals, an effort which in turn requires addressing systemic racial inequality and its impacts. Survey respondents asked for best practices and models to guide training plans and policy development to address recruiting and other needs. Lastly, some area nonprofits would like to be recognized as authorities in the domain and seek champions to help them continue and expand their work as leaders in racial equity. Just last night, I was communicating with Sonia Thessing, the executive director of Huckleberry House, a United Way agency just one block from my home that serves youth who are dealing with some of the most difficult problems imaginable. Issues like abuse, violence, neglect, poverty, and homelessness. The Huck House management team and board is focused on being an anti-racist organization, and the board has set some strong goals. 25% of all new hires, 25% of all promotions, and 75% of all new board members in the current fiscal year must be people of color. It is commitments like this that will change our community's nonprofit sector, one agency at a time. At United Way, we are helping lead the charge to diversify nonprofit boards. We're committed to providing training and tools to attract and retain diverse board candidates, building a strong talent pipeline to introduce boards to prospective members, instituting board diversity as a selection criteria for our next grant application process, and we have developed a policy requiring funded partners to have a diverse board. We are also one of the founding members of the Racial Equity Partnership, which has a goal to train 5,000 Central Ohio nonprofit employees in implicit bias and understanding the history of racism. Those trainings started earlier this month. 2020 has been a difficult year. A global pandemic that doesn't seem to want to go away. A culture and political war over face masks. A distressed economy that has raised our understanding of the sacrifices of low-wage workers. A summer of social unrest that pitted the public against public servants. And a philosophical debate between individualism over the collective. Is this the right year to address racial equity in the nonprofit sector? Of course it is. It's been a 400-year journey of racial strife in this country, and there is no reason to wait any longer to do what is right. Thanks.
Thank you, Michael. Good afternoon, everybody. Good to be here and be with you all. I have to tell you all, I didn't sleep well last night. I was tossing and turning, thinking about returning to this building. The last time I was in here, I lost prom king. And so it's interesting to be back in a different forum. And then there was the debate, which I'm sure you all watched. And the thing that's so nerve-wracking when you're a journalist is that you always get booked to do something the day after a debate. And no matter how the moderator went, people are always watching you. So our panelists have agreed to stick with the timing of everything for tonight, this afternoon. So achieving racial equity in your nonprofit. I know it sounds simple. We all understand what that means. What does that mean to each of you individually? Just briefly, how does that show up when you hear racial equity? What does that mean, Tasha?
Thanks, Carrie, for that. For City Year, it means going beyond anti-racist statements, and it doesn't mean to indict those who have put those out. But we have seen those statements, almost for the last 20 years, every time there has been a national crisis around race. Mm-hmm. For us, it's looking at our own culture. It's being able to hold two truths at the same time, that yes, we are working towards the solutions to the challenges in our community, but we also have committed harm to some of our employees and even to our communities that we serve. And how do we undo that? For us, it means doing the mirror work, which is often not trendy. It takes time. It takes all of us to be introspective. It's not easily measured. It's going beyond measuring, your hiring quotas. It really means that we have to pause before we go forward and creating a common understanding and definition for what the word equity is. We're not all using the word equitably, and so for us, it's about creating a culture change, not just systems and processes.
Got me over here about to. that was a good word right there, Dr. Asfal.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Racial equity, diversity, and inclusion to my organization as a refugee immigrant, based organization is our day-to-day function, not only on words but also in action. That the basis or the foundation of the organization is based on diversity and inclusion because of discrimination, because of racial, problems and challenges that we have, the cultural problem, the languages that we have, it is embedded in our daily life. I know it is a difficult subject to really overcome overnight or over days. It has been the generation problem, and here we are refugees coming from Africa and then embedded in this kind of racial division, which it is really shocking for us first, even to adapt to see that where I know that race is a social construct. It's not really have a biological basis to really discriminate someone because of the skin of color. So it is our day-to-day, even from our name. Tawahid, congratulations that you did it very well, means that all humanity is one. And this oneness creates a responsibility to help the community which we are part of. That means there is only one race in this planet. There is one family. and there's one community, and we are part of it. So we are struggling, really everyday conversation is about this, racial equity, diversity and inclusion, because that's what our base, our vision and mission is built on those premises. That's what we are doing every day. So any conversation starts from our name, from our work environment, even when you get into our office, the receptionists, the walls and the artists, that reflects our culture and our community. So that's what we are basing this conversation that, every day when building our partners, our team is based on these issues. So racial equity means is really the core value of addressing those issues because it affects us in every work, employment, health, or wherever in education, you'll find it that you have to fight. And then you have to educate your partners, especially the employer or the corporate world. That's what our day-to-day mission and activities.
Please silence your phone. Do not disturb does not work. Rachel.
What I'd like to add to what Tasha did a beautiful job of in particular speaking to the internal component, and Celeste spoke to the external component. So what I would add to that is, as Catholic Social Services, our mission and vision is grounded in a faith tradition that believes in the inherent life and dignity of the human person and the communal and social nature of that person. And so how can we work to enhance that inherent life and dignity and ensure that there's a space for human flourishing within the community? So that has internal components in the way that Tasha meant it, or Tasha spoke about so eloquently, and external components in the way that Dr. Celeste did, especially as a human service agency, an anti-poverty agency. Working for racial justice is inherent in that because racism has been such a force for the creation of poverty in our community. So that's what it means for us.
You hit a moment just a second ago, and you said we failed our employees. How did you get the feedback? What does that mean? How did the failing show up in the workplace?
So at City Year, we are including the word belonging to our diversity work. So it's diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And what we found in our surveys is that we had not created a culture in which all people felt like they belonged. That shows up in the form of a question of, do you see yourself here in the next several years? Do you see yourself growing with the organization? Not only did the data, the quantifiable data, show that we had people who didn't feel like they belonged, the open-ended comments really outlined the pain and the hurt that people felt, not seeing themselves in any one leader in the organization. We were founded in 1988 in Boston by two Harvard-educated, white men. Most of our organizations were all started altruistically. We didn't do a lot of culture work, right? We just thought we were helping communities, we were helping people. And as we grew and we became more successful, we started looking at who got to be a part of that success, but who also was leading that success. And when we looked at our organization and said, as a Black woman running a site in our 29 cities, yes, we're very diverse in our cities, but our national office was not diverse. As a Black woman, I don't see myself in the leadership. So where is there to go? And if I'm feeling it as an executive director, the rest of the frontline staff are feeling it. So, we started really thinking about moving beyond kind of the tangible, metrics that you can put on a dashboard, and started thinking about when you change culture, you don't need diversity initiatives. When your culture is a place that people feel like they can come to, they can grow despite their ethnicity, despite their race, these diversity initiatives become a moot point.
Rachel and Dr. Asphalt, could you talk about taking these points and failing the employees in that sense? How does that trickle down when it comes to service and even brand, because that's extremely important?
From my side, as Tasha said, the organization was established by 100 years maybe by white men or whoever that time. But I'm fortunate that I'm the one that created this organization. This is my baby. So it is based on the challenge and the needs of the community that I established this organization to fill gaps of services, to provide culturally appropriate services, and to have accessible services to the community. So when I build my team, carefully selected that who will be share my vision to really help the community of dream that we are going to passionate to serve. So it's really well designed that my board, my staff, the senior management, the middle management, the frontline staff, and even my partners are really so diverse who really understand the mission and the vision of the organization. So let me give you some statistics. About 60% of my clients are African Americans or African immigrants. About 20% of them are Asian Americans. And then the rest 20 divided between the Latino Americans and white, because there are some white coming from Eastern Europe and the Middle Eastern areas. The board reflects, because all our procedures and policies and the vision that looking is to welcome refugees, help them facilitate their integration and become productive members of our society. To do that, a diverse board, a diverse staff is really a creative and innovative. And you see the results in the program. My board, 70% of my board are multicultural and multi-ethnic groups. Or if you can split that, 53% are African Americans, and 13% are Asian Americans, 30% white Americans, and there are some mixed races. The same thing to my senior management. Over 70% of my senior management are women. It's really, I mean, this is my little secret actually. It is really, I have seen that having in your senior management on your staff, having more women, you will be benefited. They are very caring, they are very effective and efficient, and they are really charitable. So it's really, because the team that we founded this organization, because we know our vision, what we can do, is based on that diversity of our staff and our organization, even in our partnership, that when we build in, based on our mission and program design, that are gravitated, really applauding, and we have built that because we cannot do, by ourselves alone. So that will help. It is a foundation of the organizations that leads you for the diversity, for your partners, for your programs, to make the change and the impact that you want to do. But if somewhere, somehow, established, really to change that culture, takes time.
Yeah. Rachel, what about that in the sense of changing the culture, and if you aren't making the marks, you will have a trickle-down effect?
Gary, that's such an important point, but I want to start, with just one comment that was made as you were beginning this, when you said our esteemed panel of experts, when you referred to those of us sitting up here. I'm going to speak for myself. That to me is a tremendously humbling phrase to make, to sit on a panel as an expert on racial equality when, for one, Catholic Social Services is committed to this and an anti-poverty agency, and we still have a long way to go. And second, and personally and importantly, I'm a white woman. My perspective is based in that reality. It's difficult to speak about racial equality. The invitation to accept this panel was made on the day that things in Kenosha, Wisconsin were really blowing up. And as a white woman, to ask to be speaking about racial equality, I have to confront my privilege, the privilege that I gain from being a white woman. And it's uncomfortable, paralyzing, it could be. But I don't want to make it to be, because I don't want that to have power over it. When what we're talking about, and what I have the opportunity to see in both the staff and the clients that we serve, is the suffering and pain that is the result of the inequity that's been caused by racism. So internally, one of the things that we have done, while in a moment where this happens, you want to jump to building systems and processes and ensure that every fabric of your organization is just. And Catholic Social Services also has 40% of our management team is Black or a person of color. And even within that, wanting to build these systems, I have found that I have to slow down. Because while I want to jump to tactical conversations and strategies, I have to be able to be present to a conversation that can be traumatizing to people who are in my midst. As a social service agency, we work with people who are dealing with trauma all the time, and we've created an orientation of post-traumatic care. And that orientation is something we have to learn and channel internally as well. Creating that space in its discomfort has been important for us.
I think it's really interesting when we have these conversations about race, people often pick their corners and their sides when they come to the table. I like to say I like white people. I love white people. I have a lot of great white people in my life. And I just think that when we have these conversations, we often don't drop our defenses, no matter what we bring to the table. You brought up something that I'm interested in, because whenever we go through these waves in the country, I always kind of feel like I'm a fad. It's okay right now to talk about racial equality, racial equity, diversity. What do you say, Rachel, take us and start with this. What do you say to those organizations? You said you all have been working on this and you still have work to do. But these organizations that say, well, let me go ahead and put Black Lives Matter down because it sounds good. But they aren't really doing the work. How do you begin that process?
This is the work of a lifetime. We will never arrive, and we have to understand that and make that commitment to it. At the end of our lives, our hope is that we've advanced the conversation in any way that we possibly can. This is about building a more just, a more compassionate, a more inclusive society. And if there's anything worth spending your life doing, this has got to be it.
What advice would you give for someone watching, Dr. Asphalt?
I think nowadays there are a lot of people open-minded to listen and understand. There is misinformation and misguided people don't understand what's going on. So starting the dialogue and education and building awareness is really very important. The first step is dialogue. We have to open our arms, honest discussions, like forums like this, and also building partnerships. Through that, nowadays, people are really want to learn more. Of course, there are some exceptional people that they think that already they make their mind. But the reality, even look this epidemic, it has a message if we really closely listen what it means. Our future is together. The global pandemic, the global migration, the global environmental warming, global warming, all this is really to open our eyes and to see the only way that we can survive is togetherness. So I think people are starting opening their eyes and their ears. So we have to really to push and invite and engage and be patient. We cannot really, this is systemic for a long, long generation. So, building that kind of dialogue, inviting is different. For example, in our mission, we say that to increase the awareness of our culture and heritage. That's one of the pillars in our mission. Means that we have a culture, we have a value, we are innovative, we are hardworking. We came here to really part of the community, to become productive members of society. So when you start and open the conversation, really people are so interested to listen to you. Maybe one day they will not, but you'll find other ones. For example, a good example that I can really build a relationship, we have difficulties in our employees, especially skilled immigrants and refugees. We have a lot of challenges to find them a placement. The American HR understand their way of looking at resume and interview skills, and the refugee immigrant culture is so different. So, they submitted their resumes, do not call them even for interview. The reason is because they don't understand. There is a need, high-skilled employees that they're looking. A good example is AEP, American Electric Power. It takes us to establish that relationship almost 5 years. But finally, we get the right person, and we start the conversation. He was very interested. Of course, he's an immigrant himself. He listened to us because he knows the pain, the challenge that he has gone through. So with him, the door was open. We got that discussions, and then he presented to his team. He brought all his HR, administration, and our management team. We discussed who we are and how our people are challenging. We are people, highly skilled people, and also they are looking, positions that to fill in those high-skilled electrical engineers. So with that discussion, there was a lot of actually electric engineers. He was applying. No one was accepting. He applied in Michigan. He got a job in Michigan. But his families are here. So all the weekdays, he worked there in Michigan and came back in Saturdays and Sunday. So they had this conversation, approached me, and then he sent me a resume right away and said, they listen, and they hire him. And within a year, he got 2 promotions. He proved himself. Because when they see that resume and the interview, they don't think that he can do the job. But after that conversation, discussion, they convinced it, yes, because we fill that gap. So we changed the life of the employee, and we really satisfied our partners' workforce need in their community. So these are we don't be really frustrated. Let's continue, keep working, keep dreaming. We will come one day in one table around one.
I love that you talk about patience, because I think when people come to the table sometime who haven't engaged in these conversations, we have such a high expectation for them, and sometimes we just need to be patient and let them have that.
And just want to add also, building partnership and collaboration is really the current global, kind of main thing to do. And when we build I don't know whether the Partnership for Success, they are a group of professionals of racial equity groups that are providing training for professional development for staff and others. We have really a good relationship, and we are doing that professional development for our staff. So partnership and collaboration is also another way is to strengthen our relationship from the private sector, the public sector, to all cross-sectional activities.
Tasha, I want to go back a moment, because when I talked about this being a fad, you were like, I know exactly what you're talking about. What's been your experience when I said that? What came to mind?
Lack of trust. If you're a person of color, you've heard these, and seen these vision statements of being anti-racist and inclusive. You've been a part of diversity initiatives. You've sat and were chaired an affinity group. You've come to community conversations with all these promises that there will be change. And then when it's no longer trendy, a year later, you're asking, whatever happened to fill in the blank program? And so if you're a member of the BIPOC, it becomes hard to believe that anyone is going to prioritize your experiences, as either, one of our clients, or, even as employees, since we're talking about within the organization, even within organizations. So for us, it's trust. It is being able to, sit in uncomfortable conversations. Just when we start to get somewhere, someone starts crying and it shuts down the entire conversation. And I don't mean to diminish the feeling, because it's raw, right? But in order for us to move past that uncomfortableness, we have to get comfortable being uncomfortable, right? If you're feeling uncomfortable as a non-person of color, imagine what your colleagues, your people of color in your organization have felt every day that they show up to your organization or they're out publicly doing the work. One question we've started asking our development directors and development team who are from communities of color, their experience fundraising. Now I'm gonna get down a whole rabbit hole and I'm gonna stop. I'm not gonna go there, because we could talk all day long around the inequity that leaders of color in running nonprofits feel, or their development teams not being able to have access to high net worth funders for programs like this. So it's who's prioritizing those experiences who's prioritizing those conversations when it gets uncomfortable, and who's holding them accountable to ensure what we promised in those conversations and meetings actually happens.
We're going to have some, open the floor up just a few moments for some questions from the audience. We hope to get some from the live audience as well. I do want you to go down that, don't go all the way down. But I do want you to touch on that. It's a different perspective as a leader of color coming to a board, a nonprofit, other organizations, groups. You have a different experience because I imagine you show up in your organizations already being questioned and judged anyway.
Oh, yeah. I looked at these results from the survey, and I'm really grateful that United Way did them. I was not surprised. I think when you're a person of color, these results don't surprise you, right? Because you're experiencing every day. When you look at nationally, 80% of nonprofits are ran by non-people of color. And then when you break it down to the largest 315 national nonprofits, it goes to 90%. And so while we have some great diversity in our staff, which tend to be frontline staff, lower paid staff, our leadership doesn't look or reflect the community, right? We tend to hire people who we think are charismatic, who have access, or they have potential, right? And so then you start thinking about then who wants to sit on that board, right? So you start to recruit people who look like you, who come from the same community, and then who gets access to fundraising, who gets invited to the meeting after the meeting. It impacts our organizations when you are a leader of color and you don't have the same access as maybe your non-leaders of color, and you're doing similar work with similar outcomes. I could ask a company for $2,500 or $25,000, but my white colleague gets to ask for $250,000, and you're like, I didn't even know that was an option, right? And so it's deflating and it's demoralizing, and there's no space to have that conversation. And I've been encouraging, organizations like the Columbus Foundation and others that I think what we need is support systems for people of color, for our BIPOC community, leadership, and our staffs to have places. I won't call them safe spaces. I don't believe in safe spaces, and that's a whole other thing our organizations haven't created.
Rabbit hole.
Yeah, down the rabbit hole. But it's true because, right, we don't have those spaces. I'm taking a risk even talking about this, right, thinking how is it going to impact my organization that I am talking about my own lived experiences as a leader of color, one who people tell me I am respected, but yet there is a certain level of fear we have in even being able to share our experiences.
Yeah, it's interesting, the conversation. I just want to share, we have a show called The Conversation, which airs tonight at 7:30 on NBC4. And it's talking about racial equality. And when I joined the station, one thing that I found is that the folks really driving the conversation were all the black folks. And I said, well, there's room for all of us at the table because I've been having this conversation for years with my family and friends. And we need to have other voices in the room. But the burden that when we see, the results of a grand jury decision out of Louisville, that now I have to not just live with that as a black person, but then I have to compartmentalize it so I can tell it as a story. But now I have the responsibility of putting it on air. And some of my non-black colleagues don't take part in that. It's a challenge that you will see white people tonight on The Conversation. It is CMC's tradition to take audience questions. Lainey Cuthbert of CMC is gathering the questions from the live stream audience. So if you are here in our audience, please remember to keep your microphone time to the question. And we thank you for avoiding the editorial comments, as I've been doing all morning. Jane, what's our first question?
And I'm Lainey. Hi, Carrie. This is from Amanda Everett. She asks, in a predominantly white community, how do I effectively make the case for the importance of racial equity work? While we lack diversity in our community, we want to achieve more inclusive and diverse population in their events and programming. What advice do you have for looking at current programming and events through a racial justice lens in the field of community placemaking and economic vitality?
Sounds a little bit like this person might be living in an environment similar to where I grew up. I'm from a rural community in Alexandria, Indiana, of about 5,000 people, and there were two African American people in my high school, And then during the summer, we would have a large migrant community that would come in. And so diversity was being Catholic. But I think that in any space, what Tasha was talking about and Carrie, how do we create that space where we can be trusting of one another and open and start the conversation? I mean, we start the conversation and we learn and develop conversations where we are. And getting that going can, I think, be effective no matter where one starts.
I can certainly tell you what not to do. And that is not to rely on your relational proximity. Don't ask your one black friend or the one neighbor to educate the whole community. I think it's everyone's responsibility to become educated. There's too much information out there now for anyone to sit in sheer ignorance. You know, do some research, you know, yourself, and then start to examine your own self, right? It's very easy to want to bring someone in to educate, and it happens to be a one-time event. It has to be constant conversations, and it actually starts at home. You know, I would encourage conversations with your family. It includes stopping inappropriate conversations that happen in your friend groups or within your own family. You can disagree, but not be disrespectful to groups. And so I would say start there.
Just to build on that, over the summer, over Zoom, I had a conference call with 4 of my nieces who are between the age of 13 and 15. We read the book Stamped together. You need to have a space where you can say the wrong thing and learn that it's, you know, you can get better. You learn how to say the right thing, and you come from a place where people have positive intent. I think that can be really helpful to give people comfort in talking about it.
Cordis with United Way of Central Ohio. So what is your advice about how to keep the energy going and the momentum flowing so we're not just in a moment of time? Help us be better.
I think to keep the momentum of this conversation nowadays, you know, the air full of that diversity, inclusion, and all those rallies, which is really a good momentum. So, you know, to keep the momentum and truly to bring in this conversation into action is continuously to do a broad sectorial collaboration, which includes different institutions, the media, the public, elected officials. Let's come together. I mean, the rallies and all the other things are really good to wake up or to make pressure on the policymakers. But now this is time to really frame in a different sector, sit down, okay, in the law enforcement, in our schools, in areas of discrimination or racial disparities, how really, because race is one of the roots cause of poverty. We have been struggling for poverty for a long time. The human service agencies were fighting, but we are not eradicating. It's still there. So why? There is a time really to sit down and understand the why to answer that. And also to use existing efforts that has been, for example, the good example, the Franklin County Commissioner's Blueprint. It's a good document. You know, they brought different experts together, and you know, we work from different sectors, from the community, from others. Rather than inventing, it is well spelled out that race is the front and center of all our problems. So if we can work on that and into action, that will keep the momentum. And I'm glad that the mayor also created the recent Resilience and Recovery Act Committee. That's a good momentum. And in the police force, there should be a kind of committees that really understand how to diversify the force of the police engagement. In our teachers, you know, the children life, because we have to invest in our children. The children's knowledge and attitude and behavior is shaped by the family. The family is God-given institution, a long, you know, traditional institution. We have to keep that, and then the teachers are the one, and the peer pressure. So if we can work and diversify also teachers, where the majority of colored people are there, we have to reflect that kind of, you know, having those teachers. So I think the momentum is, let's sit down in a small group and figure out why we didn't achieve. For all this long, we fight poverty, but still poverty is here. What's the reason? Let's figure out, let's use the existing documents into action.
We have just a couple minutes left. I want to squeeze in a couple more questions.
Hi, I'm Courtney Clark, a recent MBA graduate from Ohio State, and I would kind of have a two-part question. First, how can maybe candidates for positions at nonprofit organizations do the research, get the information that they need to ensure that they are joining an organization that is truly committed to the work of anti-racism and not just kind of saying that publicly, but really working on that internally? And then on the flip side, how can nonprofit organizations, when they are hiring employees, ensure that, especially if they're hiring employees from backgrounds of privilege or white employees, how can they ensure that those employees are going to be really bought into the culture and work of anti-racism as well? Thank you.
Why don't you start with that one, because that's what you just were touching on.
Yeah, thank you. The first part, to your question of, ensuring that the conversation continues to happen. I think, to Lisa's point, our budgets, what we invest in, our salary lines, our org charts, those are moral documents. A lot of that is public. So you can almost look up anything for a nonprofit organization. I would also encourage you to look at Glassdoor. Now, if you're an employer, you'll stay away from Glassdoor. It's not always true. We can't always write off those folks as disgruntled employees. Those are real experiences, whether we agree or not. There's so much valuable, rich information that's out there. Social media is also, a great space, to learn more. What are people saying? We're now living in cancel culture, right? So it's easy for someone to say, hey, this happened to me, whether we agree or not. That is someone's perspective, and I think it's clearly important. And I would just ask, in an interview, if an organization or a company is steeped in racism work or equity work, they would have no problem eloquently sharing their vision. And then they're going to ask you, right? Give me examples. I would even start to ask, like, what circles do you hang in? Looking at what organizations are you affiliated with? Where do you volunteer? Where do you spend your time, right? Because that will show up. And if I look and you're maybe a white candidate, and I'm saying, everything you do seems to not be steeped in diversity, I might question and I might push you on that. Not saying we will disqualify you for that, because you may have the skills and talents we're looking for. We want you to be able to grow and adapt to our culture. We're not going to automatically disqualify you because you might not fit in, but we hope that you remain coachable. As my mentor used to say, you have to always remain coachable. And that's also how we keep the momentum going, to Lisa's point. Anything we prioritize, if it's important to us, we prioritize responding to this pandemic. Now that we have named in Columbus and Franklin County that racism is a public health crisis, then we have to operate with that same level of urgency. So keeping the momentum shouldn't be as challenging when we're steeped in that work. And I think nonprofit agencies are proximate for us to keep that momentum alive.
Jump out of her seat.
Sorry.
I get excited. Well, first off, congratulations on your degree. The second, I would say there's truth in cliches sometimes, but the proof's in the pudding. Look at what they've done. How have they, people operationalize their strategy, and where have you seen that organization take its values into the community, especially human service nonprofits, but not exclusively. I mean, Celeste's sitting here talking about how he created an organization in order to respond to racism. We took a food pantry on the west side of Columbus and turned it into the Our Lady of Guadalupe Center to create a community place for Hispanic immigrants who want to build a new life for themselves to be able to do that. Look at the results that the organization has made. How have they taken that commitment to racial equity and turned it into transformational programming?
We have time for one more question.
Okay, kind of along the same lines, Lori Keating is saying that their organization has made a $500,000 commitment to support initiatives addressing systematic racism in the justice system. Yes, but this has never been their focus in the past. and their board and their grants committee consists entirely of lawyers, and I will underline probably not an extremely diverse group of people, per their regulations. She's asking how would be a good way to educate the grants committee and the board about what to look for in an effective initiative and who should they bring to the table from the community.
Well, there are incredible philanthropic organizations in our community that you can draw a lot from. And what I think that they do, and Tasha said this before, there is great information out there. I mean, when we look at what is happening, when we look at the health and economic impact of COVID on our community, it's not a surprise to those of us who've been in the anti-poverty movement for a while. We've seen this racial justice and disparity for years. So you can get yourself educated, and you can partner with some of the people who've been doing it for a long time, either the executive directors of nonprofits in our community or great philanthropic organizations who are, I think, really raising up a trust-based approach to philanthropic investment in our community. But it's about impact, it's about quality, and it's about access at the end of the day.
I would also encourage them to get out when we can safely and go visit those organizations, go and see the programs in action. You're not going to get that just by Googling, right? You're also not going to get that from their impact report at the end of the year. You really have to get proximate to the work. We encourage our board, when a new board member is coming on, before they're even voted on, they have to do a school visit, right? They are meeting with our frontline staff, having a conversation about their experiences and the work that they're doing. They see the students that we're serving. They talk to the principals of the schools and even the students in our roundtables, right? You gotta, live the work and live the mission in order to really be able to invest wisely and invest. What we're looking for is investors who understand that this is generational work. So it's not just about what the organization is doing, it's also really rethinking what the foundations or the funders' values are. Are you interested in, quick fix, metrics, or are you looking at generational work? And so some of the best, funders, United Way, the foundation, Annie Casey, I can list them all, they're investing long and deep, right? Because they understand that we didn't get here in one fiscal year, that we've gotten here over a generation. And so I would encourage them that it's a two-step process and doesn't just rely on the information they're getting from the organization.
And we're just against the clock, but I want to give Dr. Asphalt the last word on who might organizations want to consider having at the table in these conversations.
I think a diverse human services organizations should be in the table for a discussion from different sectors, maybe those who provide employment, or those provide from health, or from the cultural and diversity groups, refugee, immigrant, new Americans. So I think you can pick and then having that kind of conversation. And sometimes it's good to visit and interact with their management team or with their board, or invite us so that we can share what we are doing, so that way you can learn and we learn from you, so that way we can build a good relationship and then understand what's going on.
Thank you all so much.
Okay.
Well, great. I hope that you found today's forum inspirational and interesting. Next week, on October 3rd, CMC, Nationwide Children's Hospital, and the Wexner Medical Center present our Optimal Health series with a look at the crisis in domestic violence. Thanks to today's sponsors, Huntington and GCAC, our live stream sponsors, NCR and The Ohio State University, partner United Way of Central Ohio, our live stream partners, PNC, NBC4, and the Columbus Dispatch, and to our online virtual seat patrons. Thank you all. Let's have a hand for our sponsors. And finally, a thanks to our speakers, Rachel Lustig, Celestia Asfa, Tasha Booker, Carrie Charles, and Michael Wilkos. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for your contributions. We hope to see you again soon, but until then, be well and stay safe. Have a good day, everybody.